Go, Nathan.
Okay, we're live.
Yes.
It usually tells me. I don't know why it hasn't been doing that lately, so sorry, folks. But anyways, welcome to another edition of the Dynasty Dudez Hangout with my friend Russell Clay and a special guest, Matt Harmon. How's it going tonight, fellas?
Woof, 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 woof.
I don't know how to follow. I don't know how to follow that. But it's good. I'm doing good.
Okay, so all three of us, we are all avid dog owners. And Matt often posts pictures of Charlie on the Twitter. So
Yes.
we made this a special dog edition. And Russell, he has painted his face like a dog for some reason. I really have no idea why. Would you like to explain?
You know, I could, come up with some reasoning based on all the dog talk on my timeline, but I'm not going to try to do that, and I'm just going to say maybe I wanted to paint my face a little bit, and that's probably what happened here. And I found an excuse for it, so. But
Whoever did that for you did quite a job.
yeah, I have to. Shout out to Karen Walls. Crushed it.
What a nice lady.
She has a talent.
All right.
Now we'll show if we have talent to get through the show with my face like this.
Probably not, but
No, I do not have that talent.
All right, so we're going to start off with some news and notes before we get into Matt's reception, perception, whatnot. So news and notes for the week. A lot of news came out today because it was the first day of the combine and whatnot. Lots of press conferences and people yabbering and whatnot. So Larry Fitzgerald, he signed a restructured deal, 2 years, $22 million. Really doesn't other than the fact that it kind of solidifies he'll be in Arizona. Doesn't really mean much for dynasty owners. It's like, okay, he's stuck in Arizona. We kind of already knew that because of his bad contract. Now, it's not as bad of a contract, but he's still in Arizona.
Yeah, no, there was that slight optimism that maybe he would go to a different team and sort of reinvigorate his dynasty value, but this is just, this sucks.
Any optimism for Fitzgerald after this deal, Matt?
Not really. I mean, I don't think it changes much about him, and it doesn't really do anything good for. It doesn't open up any more targets for Michael Floyd or John Brown or anything. So it's kind of good for his sentimental value and the cuteness of the story. But as far as his dynasty value, I don't think it really improves anything. Obviously, I don't have a lot of optimism.
Right. Michael Floyd was the other potential gainer from if Fitz ever left, and now that that's not here, kind of sucks for both of them. But
what about Robert Hausler, Truthers? Are they still out there?
He's a free agent, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure he's a free agent, so he'll probably be the Patriots' move tight end and get a bunch of off-season hype in a few months.
Oh, so Zach Sudfeld in August.
Yeah, basically, that's the angle I'm going for.
Yeah, no, if Rob Hausler goes to New England, it's gonna be nutty. His ADP is gonna skyrocket. So.
Well, people are already hyping up Virgil Green, so I mean.
Yeah. There's some crazy tight end hype trains that come along across the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another news that came off from the combine, Jay Gruden said that Robert Griffin III is his quarterback. He'll be starting day one. Of course, that's assuming they don't draft a quarterback somehow. But I don't know. For me, Robert Griffin III, I'm going to believe it when I see it as far as him returning to his rookie form. I really don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, okay, I'm going to miss out on it.
What do you think, Matt?
I mean, I told you guys right before we started that I live in Fairfax, which is right outside D.C., and so I'm painfully familiar with Washington football. And this is just another step in a long cycle of sadness for that franchise. And no, I don't have any optimism about Griffin rebounding. I mean, he was barely even playing, high school level of quarterbacking last year. It was embarrassing, and I don't think it's going to get any better. And I I don't really know I don't know what the future holds for either player or team, but I think they kind of need to get away from each other. So this obviously does not do anything to help that.
Yeah, I mean, we look at these players. Obviously, we don't know too much in-depth stuff in the locker room, but I mean, you could tell by the way RG3 was playing that his confidence is pretty shot at this point. I think if he has any chance of sort of revitalizing his career, he needs to go somewhere else.
Well, he took even the year before this, but especially last year, he took at least one or two Bambi falling on the ice sacks a game. I mean, so I don't. You're right. He doesn't have any confidence in his ability or his knee.
Right, his knee. Yeah.
That's the big thing. And I mean, he just was. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever read that or heard the audio from that Chris Cooley. Pretty much when he took him down for how poorly he was playing. But I mean, he was just pointing out that Griffin wasn't even hitting simple 3-read plays or anything like that. So it's a mess.
Yeah, his rookie season is looking like it's going to go down in the what the heck happened seasons ever for any player. It was like he was an elite talent, and then it's just gone. It's just crazy.
That's Washington. That's Washington, baby.
He had the ACL in college, so I mean, it's a good chance. Okay, you've torn it twice, you're kind of done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for such a movement-based player, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a pair of GM speak comments coming out of the Vikings camp. Rick Spielman was talking at the Combine. He said, and this will hurt all the CP truthers out there, including myself, Charles Johnson is the Vikings' best receiver. While he was on Couldn't Care Less Island last week.
Still there.
That doesn't mean that Rick Spielman doesn't still love him.
He's already shipped off. The decision has been made, and stubborn Russ is here to stay.
Yeah, the one piece of news I kind of take from this is that I think that they're definitely going to be targeting a receiver early in the draft. They've given up on Patterson. If you can believe GM speak at this point in the process, which, it's debatable whether you should or not. But I definitely think that wide receiver is going to be a priority for them early on.
Yeah, I agree. I was a Patterson truther. I still am. I mean, I'll say I think it'll take a second team. And I actually think that just the way that they've handled him this year is probably not good for his long-term career outlook. Although by all accounts he's pretty worthless as far as learning the playbook and just from what I've heard, that sort of stuff. It's a mess right now. That's another mess. I mean, that's what we're talking about tonight. Is just all around messes. And Patterson is rough. He was one of the first receivers that I ever profiled for reception perception, and that doesn't look so good at this point. Luckily, I think people have forgotten about that. So shh. But anyways,
this is supposed to be promotional. So.
Well, yeah, no. In some alternate universe, Patterson broke out this year, and it was the biggest launching point for reception perception. But here in reality, that's not the case. But I like Charles Johnson though as a player. I think he has a future I think he can start.
Okay. All right. So the other Vikings news is Spielman expects Adrian Peterson to be back, which makes me kind of want to pump my brakes on my Jerick McKinnon MFL 10 shares. But, yeah, I mean, I honestly, another one of those things where I'll believe it when I see it. But any sort of expectations for Peterson if he's back in the Vikings uniform in 2015?
As you said, I actually think the bigger deal here is McKinnon because I actually like his price point regardless of sort of what happens with Adrian Peterson. I think the ceiling there is worth the potential miss on Peterson coming back, but I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
If Peterson comes back, I don't think it's quite business as usual. Just because, I mean, he'll have been a year away from the game, and even though he's a freak and he's the exception to every rule, I still think that that team is going to kind of be more Teddy focused than Adrian focused. Well, I don't know, but I'm with Nathan though. I'll believe this when I see it. I don't think there's any way he's back at his current cap hit, and I think they'll ultimately probably end up releasing him, and then he will not go back there. But that's just kind of my gut feeling about it.
Right.
Okay, so my McKinnon shares are safe right now. Whew.
Yeah, no, I mean he's due like 15.1 million, or that's like his cap hit or something. There's no way he's gonna make that this year. Not in Minnesota.
Yeah,
That's an insane number for a running back. That is a huge cap hit.
One of the guys that I've kind of been like telling my friends and people in the Twitter community, I was like, "There's no way Vincent Jackson is a Buck in 2015." I was just thinking he doesn't really serve much purpose on a rebuilding team, and he's the fourth highest paid receiver in the NFL. I just didn't think it was a match. But more GM speak. Mark Dominic came in and said, "Yeah, we love Jackson. He's going to play out his contract as a Buccaneer." So,
wasn't Mark Dominic the GM three GMs ago?
Right. Shows how much I care about the Bucs anymore. I don't GM.
Nathan's in straight up depression denial over the Bucs right now, and he's just irrationally saying things.
Oh, dude, I've been in depression denial about the Panthers for like 3 years too, so I'm right there with you.
We had the playoffs 2 years ago, so.
So, okay, what do we think about VJax and sort of his value right now? And I don't know, like, what do you see going forward from him?
Well, we're going to talk about Evans later in the show, but I think obviously he's going to be the number one there now. He's really impressive, so I think Jackson ends up taking a back seat, and they're probably going to be breaking in a rookie quarterback. So I think that they'll probably try to push that young wide receiver, young quarterback relationship right away. And while they don't really have anybody else to get targets, I think Jackson is obviously on the decline. That's pretty bad.
Part of this is actually like the era of the receivers we're in. Like, I don't think Jackson is terrible, but
No.
I think he's like a wide receiver 3 in fantasy right now at best.
Yeah.
That's not even saying he's terrible. It's just like I don't really see him doing better than that.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want? There's so many good wide receivers, like the top guys on their own team. Why do you want an older number 2 wide receiver on a team without a quarterback at this point?
Right, and it's so weird how the wide receiver sort of position has shifted, and it's like guys like VJax and Roddy, what do you really do with them anymore?
Yeah.
Low end wide receiver 3, sort of. So it's just weird, and I was much higher on Vincent Jackson last year, and this is not heading in a good trend right now,
Yeah, and then another guy who kind of made somewhat news, Roto World Blurb or whatever. Julius Thomas, likely to leave Denver, kind of what we all expected. And this kind of caused a bit of a stir from like the film draft Twitter or whatever. They were all going crazy about whether Julius Thomas was actually good or not. I tend to think he's more of a product of Peyton than a really good player. But do you have a differing opinion on that, Matt? Do you think he could succeed in Oakland or in a different place without a Peyton?
Well, I think his obviously won't hit that ceiling that he's had with Peyton the last few years, but I think, like I said this today, I said that I think Julius Thomas has gone from, like, breakout star to underrated in, like, less than a calendar year, which is odd. So I probably fall on the more positive end of the spectrum, even though I think, obviously, we've seen probably the best years of his career if he does indeed leave Denver. But I think depending on landing spot, he could still have some pretty good value. I mean, I'd still rather have him than most of the tight end field. Take out Graham and Gronkowski. I mean, I still think Thomas is probably a very valuable player. I mean, he's a high end athlete at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to say if he goes to Oakland, I mean,
Well, that's
anyone who goes to Oakland, it's like that puts their career on the back burner. But say he goes to, like, a decent situation, obviously statistically he's not going to put up Peyton numbers again, but I think he could be a 2 or 3 option in an offense and be productive,
Yeah.
So he's another waiting game that his ADP is still a little high for me, but I guess I could justify it if he goes to a decent team or a decent situation.
Yeah, there's some teams out there that could use a tight end. So I mean, it really does, like you said, it depends on the situation.
The Falcons don't need a tight end. Levine Toilolo is going to be the next.
Oh my God, yeah, that is a great place for him to go to. Would be Atlanta.
Yeah.
Even though they like completely forgot that position existed on the football field last year.
It was amazing how they just completely ignored the position. It was just all
yeah.
Roddy Julio. And
Yeah.
then like Anton Smith would get sprinkled in there every once in a while.
Yeah, take like a 70-yard run to the house.
Yeah.
God, I hate the way that team is built.
It's so bad.
Yeah, it's so stupid. And now they're doing that whole thing where they kept the GM and fired the coach and but I don't want to talk about the Falcons.
All right, so for those who actually like watch the Hangout and don't just listen while at work, how many times have you chuckled while looking at Russell's face?
I'm trying not to look at
I
Russell's face.
actually think Nathan's faring worse because whenever I start talking, I can see him start to smirk over in the corner there. But
I try to look away. I've been really trying to look away. But and there have definitely been a few times where I've been talking and I see Russell's face come on there and I'm like, oh my God, what was I talking about?
where am I right now? Maybe you're in the alternate universe right now.
This is the alternate universe. If this isn't it, then I don't want to know where I am. But I do know for a fact I will be having nightmares about it.
Like 10 years from now, you wake up in a cold sweat and you're just like, oh my God, tongue was so pink.
Jeez.
All right,
Yeah.
so we'll wrap up the news and notes with Russell's weekly.
Nathan, did you bring your hula outfit for this week?
My who?
Your hula outfit for Couldn't Care Less Island.
I didn't know that was a thing, but I'll make sure to have it next week.
Matt could probably make a nice little intro for us right now or something. But all right, basically, if for those of you that don't know, every week I say a Dynasty player that isn't going to pique my interest this off season, and I'm not going to buy any shares of them. As I say every week, I do this a little bit because I'm slightly lazy, and I also do this from experience of falling for sort of players that don't necessarily have high odds of hitting. So this week is Browns running back Terrence West. I never really understood the appeal. He got picked in the 3rd round, so that's all right. But I just didn't really see anything last year to make me really change my sort of initial scouting report on him. And I like Crowell better. Usually a 3rd round player I would sort of still throw some shares at, but I don't see the upside. He didn't really show me anything. So, do you guys have any differing opinions on him, or what do you think?
How about you, Matt?
I actually liked Terrence West coming out of school. I think I had him as like my 5th back in the class last year, and I mean I don't really
bad class.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't think that's like a hot take just because it was such a jumbled mess of a running back class. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing to see Crowell and West end up in the same place. Just because I mean, Crowell was my top back, just based on talent or whatever.
Right.
And then now the key thing in all this is that they lost Kyle Shanahan because they're the Browns and they can't hold down good things. And he's a good offensive coordinator. I really think he's really underrated in that regard. And also like he just brings that very profitable zone running scheme. So yeah, I don't really see the appeal of West anymore. And even Crowell, I'm not crazy about his long-term outlook with that team.
It's hard to be crazy about any Browns right now. The whole franchise,
It's amazing though. Like a year ago, I think everyone was sort of at least a little optimistic about their situation. At least before Josh Gordon got suspended. I mean, I looked at the Browns offense and I was like, wow, this could potentially be something here. and it's just like they get out to that huge start early, and then it just all falls apart, and now everything's dead.
Including Mansell.
And Manziel's in rehab, so it's like...
Yeah, what a night. Like, I mean, it definitely was a combustible situation, like with Gordon, Crowell, and Manziel being like kind of these promising young figures, and they've all have like some issues in their background. Now Gordon's suspended, Manziel's in rehab. It really is like Jordan Cameron will probably leave in free agency. He's another like talented
player. And he would had another injury-filled season, and it was just like how crazy.
It's disgusting. I can't even imagine like being a fan of
oh,
it's awful. Quit. I would never do that to myself. I have no loyalties like in that regard.
Yeah, I'd pretty much just start following storylines and stuff of like the league and be like, oh well, this would be cool if this happened, instead of rooting for the Browns anymore.
If I grew up a Browns fan, I would save all my money, buy a boat, and just cast off into the ocean. Never have to hear about that franchise again. And to see that god-awful jerk with all the quarterbacks on the back.
Yeah, dude, there's like 15 of them now.
Like, if I was a dedicated Browns fan, I don't know how I wouldn't have, like, a mental breakdown every time that popped up on my timeline. I would have gone through, like, 20 computers just tossing them against the wall.
And the worst part is, like, all your rivals win Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Like, the Ravens and the Steelers are just loading up on like, AFC championships and Super Bowls, and you're just sitting there.
Right. I can't even imagine.
All right, so we'll move on to how we got the big money guest, Matt Harmon himself, on the Hangout.
Oh boy! All right, we can't let it. We can't hype him up this much. Can't let it go to his head. He'll never come back.
His project, Perception.
That probably wouldn't be the reason why he wouldn't come back. But all right, continue, Nathan.
I can think of one.
So, Matt, just give us a little primer here. How did you start with the Reception Perception, and where can people find it?
Sure. So Reception Perception. I'm not going to look at Russell the whole time I talk. So Reception Perception started last off season. It is basically something I'd been cooking up for a while because the wide receiver position is my favorite thing about football. This like the very poetic and interesting matchup between wide receiver and cornerback has always appealed to me. And like, I mean, I grew up with like Randy Moss and Steve Smith as like my favorite football players. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but whatever. But anyway, so I've always been like attracted to that position, and so I kind of wanted to create something that was my own. And I come from a pretty heavy like academic background, so like charting things and like kind of putting quantitative reality or quantitative figures to qualitative realities is something that really appeals to me. So it just made sense, and just I don't really know anybody else that's doing work like that as much with the routes and the success rate versus coverage scores and everything. So it was kind of just being able to build something that was my own. And so I put out the first two articles. The first one was on Jordy Nelson, and the second was on Cordero Patterson, the now infamous one that we don't like to talk about. And then it evolved into like a fantasy series when I got hired by Football Guys, and now it's I'm using it to evaluate draft prospects as much as I can get, all 22 film on them. And I'm also I'll be releasing annually now a Reception Perception Project publication. Every summer I'll put it out, and basically it'll be just an evaluation of 8-game sample sizes of pretty much every relevant wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, even guys that some people would consider irrelevant, like Cordero Patterson, will figure into the analysis. So really, it's just I would say it's the most in-depth evaluation of a wide receiver you could possibly imagine. I mean, it takes everything into account as far as how often they get open, how often they make contested catches, how many routes they run, how many routes they're targeted on. It's a lot to explain, but you can find it all. The Draft Prospect Series is going on at Football Guys this offseason, which we're open for free during the offseason, so anybody can view that sort of stuff. And then my website is thebackyardbanter.com. where you can find the preview for this big project, and also I'm putting occasional like blog posts about just something that I wrote about Crabtree the other week because when I was charting him I found him interesting. So that is the long form sort of idea of what reception perception is.
And the cool part about this is you're doing work that sort of the things you're figuring out aren't necessarily easy things to find. Like,
Right.
I don't know anywhere else where you could find what types of routes people are running, And I don't know. I think that's a really cool facet of the thing. And while we like to think players progress, I think this is a really good indicator, sort of who they are as receivers.
Yeah, totally. And that's something that I think that, especially since it's draft time, I think that's something the draft community is kind of coming around to this year, is that players don't really change that much. I think in the past we factor too much, and I've been guilty of this too, and I will continue to be guilty of it, because oddly enough I'm not perfect. But I think that we factor progression and taking leaps in their game. I think we factor that too much into evaluation of college prospects and NFL players. So I think that's a good point. That I think something I try to capture with reception perception is this is what they are, and it sort of divorces it from their team and their quarterback. Like I like to say that doesn't really have an effect on a lot of the numbers. So.
Right, and obviously an offensive coordinator could mold them into something, into a certain role that could be more effective, but getting that base down is important,
Yeah,
I know what they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, something big for fantasy, essentially fantasy consumers, and it's kind of something that they want laid out on a platter for them, and it's not always the case. Do you think that the reception perception, and it's kind of tough to tell because you've only been doing it for less than a year, but do you think it's predictive at all as far as future routes or future ability, or do you think it's more of an analyzation of what you're looking at today?
I think like when you get a large enough sample size, I think it can be very predictive about just showing what a receiver does well. So, like I chart success rate versus coverage against man defense versus zone defense. So I would say that if you get enough games of a receiver going, having a lot of success against man coverage, then you can kind of say, okay, well, in Week 16 during the fantasy playoffs, he plays against the Seahawks, who use a lot of man coverage. Maybe he'll have a little more success than a regular receiver would going against them. That's kind of something that I'm working with to publish next year, is especially after getting all the information from doing all this charting in the offseason. Hopefully that it'll kind of be able to be a little more predictive. Because I did, like the 1 or 2 game sample sizes for football guys this year, and some of the posts, were more predictive than others. Like I think Terrence Williams is a good example. That post showed that he wasn't being targeted on a high percentage of his routes. He really wasn't getting open that often. So you could kind of predict that even though he started off the year on a hot streak, catching a lot of touchdowns, you could look at reception perception and say, okay, this is probably not going to continue. And that bore out to be the case. Same with Torrey Smith, where it showed he was getting open, he just wasn't getting the targets, and I kind of said if he does get the targets, then this is that he's doing his job.
Right, and in terms of the player itself, I feel like you're just trying to get a read on what the player is, and then you sort of figure out ranges of outcomes, yardage, and sort of fantasy points-wise. Because their players get hurt, they get nicked up, they're maybe not playing at 100%. Maybe like their quarterback gets hurt. So stats aren't always going to be like perfect representations of who they are. But I think at its sort of ceiling, this is what you look for Dynasty especially.
I think that's a really good point. Not to belabor this any more than it needs to be, but I think that's a really good point by you, is that I'm just really looking for ranges of outcomes, because like I said, this is just about the individual wide receiver, not so much what's going on around them, which is sometimes more conducive to fantasy success than than just what one player is doing. So it's a helpful tool. It doesn't give all the answers, of course.
Right.
All right, so we'll move on to of course, the talk of the early offseason has been the sophomore receivers and then the rookies, of course. So we'll start off with a couple of sophomore receivers. Mike Evans and Sammy Watkins. You can start off with either one you want. What did you learn from tracking stuff that you've seen from their rookie seasons?
We'll start off with Watkins, and I have a post up on some of the numbers of from his rookie season. I have that up on Backyard Banter, and it was just interesting to me that his success rate versus man coverage it came over an 8-game sample. It came out as like 49.5% success rate versus man coverage, and that was identical to the number that I had from Patterson during his rookie season. So I know, and so I kind of bore that point out a little and put a little context to it, because I think every statistic, whether it's a reception perception statistic or just a yards per carry, everything any number in the NFL, needs some sort of context. So I brought a little context to that and kind of made it appear a little less damning than it would originally appear. However, I do think that after charting those 8 games and watching Watkins specifically, I think that I've come away much less enthusiastic about his future than I was when he came into the league. And I mean, I know he was the popular 101 pick in Dynasty leagues last year. He was going pretty high in redraft leagues as well. So I don't see how anybody can logically have him as any higher than the 3rd wide receiver amongst those sophomores, after Mike Evans and Odell Beckham, because not to mention his situation's a nightmare with E.J. Manuel and Rex Ryan. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse for a wide receiver than to be partnered with those two. But then just Watkins as an individual player, I think he struggled as a rookie. And I mean, I think this post kind of explains that.
Wow.
That's something interesting to note. It's like he actually had a good fantasy season.
Right. And I think that he did score. I mean, I noted that he scored a lot of points on big plays and stuff like that. But just from a down-to-down basis, I think that, look, I mean, he didn't run a lot of routes in college, and he was kind of a limited, player. And I think that I don't know about you guys, but I know I kind of wasn't as concerned about that as I should have been. But I think that bore itself out a little bit his rookie year.
Well, that was interesting because he was sort of a guy that I looked at where I actually thought his stats could get better from his rookie season, whereas all these other guys put up ridiculous seasons, and it's going to be hard to sort of – obviously they could continue on their paces, but I looked at Watkins as a guy that might be able to sort of increase instead of decrease, but you saying that kind of worries me because if he individually was a problem, the situation sure as heck isn't getting better.
Yeah.
They had Josh McCown at the Sabres game, so he might be coming.
Oh no!
That's like the biggest Rex move ever. But just 2 little asterisks though to note for Watkins' rookie season. One, he was hurt, and I mean it was pretty obvious watching his film from his rookie year that he was hurt during several of these games that I charted. And also there was one against Revis where his success rate against man coverage was like 27.7%, which is like stupid low. That's the lowest that I've ever charted. And I mean, so that one game definitely influences that overall figure, which is something that I went in and added to the post. Like, hey, don't forget that this is part of it. So I'm not saying like sell on Watkins. I'm just saying like as a in context with his peers from that class, he's clearly a step behind the other 2 guys.
Okay, and I believe it was an ankle, right?
Yeah, like a ankle, hamstring. I don't know.
Yeah, it was one of those, and that definitely hinders a receiver, especially an explosive one. Oh, look who's here!
Yeah, the boy is up. He's not looking out the window.
There he is.
So I know that you started tracking Evans this week or last week. Any initial thoughts on Mike Evans?
Yeah, let me BS for a couple seconds while I actually pull up his numbers that I did start him. I'm through I think 4 or 5 games, and overall I mean he's impressive. I actually wasn't sure if he was going to be if he was going to be a really balanced route runner, but he's he's incredible. He runs a fair bit of other routes other than just what you'd expect. I mean, the most frequent route I have him on is like a curl route, which makes sense for a big 6'5", like over 230-pound guy like him. Just turn around and box out the cornerback, and he has like a 90% success rate on those routes. So he's obviously producing. I will say, because I track fantasy points per route as well. None of the others come in over 8 fantasy points through this sample. But then his like points off 9 routes, which is just running straight down the field, is like 50, is over 50. So I mean that's where he's getting a lot of his points, which makes sense because he's a big guy, he's fast, he can run down the field and just catch balls that way. So I mean I don't want any of that to say that I'm like not encouraged by what I see from Evans, is just because I think his success rate versus man coverage, it'll probably come down once I finish the sample, but right now it's in the 80s, like 70s, 80%, which is pretty good. It's very good. And so yeah, he's a good player, and obviously, he was not facing the top cornerbacks usually, but then, like as the season went on, teams started to double him a little more, really started to get physical with him at the line of scrimmage, and I think he's pretty much passed the test. So, Evans would clearly be my number 2. I don't have anything on Beckham at the moment, but yeah, Evans had a very good rookie season, and his reception perception numbers are bound to be good.
All right.
Hold on. My personal perception of him before, obviously, I read any of your stuff, is I just whenever I think of him, I just see him running 20 to 30 yards down the field and just dominating some corner. That's that's what he did at Texas A&M, and it just seems like he's going to be able to win there consistently in the NFL too. So whenever you can get a guy that can do that consistently, it's but like you mentioned, he can win in other routes too. So I think he's just the real deal,
Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, he pretty much does everything well. And like the crazy part about him, and I wish I had factored this into my analysis more of him as a draft prospect. He's only been playing football for like a very short amount of time, right? I don't know the exact. It's very short. Yeah, he's just dripping with like just natural potential as a physical human being. Plus, he's super young too. So if he can refine some of these things, and like I know we always say, like we're saying, don't factor that into the equation. But if he does, I mean, he's going to be a really dangerous player, and he already is.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing that I've kind of heard from people who like to watch film and whatnot, and I'm not sure how much you can factor into this, and if you even see it on the reception perception type thing. But I'll also say that Mike Evans had a lot of like non-calls and offensive pass interference that like refs might start looking for that more often. Do you think that that's something that you kind of saw in the film, and that might hinder? Obviously, it's not going to destroy his value, but can that hurt him long term?
I don't really know. I don't really know what that's a very like anecdotal piece of analysis that I know a lot of people. I was a little concerned about that with him coming out of college, because he definitely threw guys around in the NFL. I mean, at Texas A&M, and everybody was kind of like, oh, well, he's not going to be able to do that in the NFL, or he won't get away with it.
And guess what? He can just throw them around.
Yeah, and so I don't really know what that's supposed to mean as far as like. So and I know it. So I know that is a concern. So you're right to bring that up, but I don't see that as a big deal. I haven't noticed it like through my charting or whatever. He gets open very naturally, very effortlessly. I don't think there's a lot of him like pushing people over like kindergartners or something.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a Cincinnati DB that he literally just threw like a rag doll. So.
Yeah. I mean, he's a bad guy. I mean, he's a bad man, and that's good though. I like a little bit of that as a receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to this rookie class. Two of the guys that I've talked about on Twitter and their podcasts that aren't as good as this one. DGB and Cooper. You have a preference to start off there?
Well, if we're just talking about as a football player, I mean, Dorial Green-Beckham blows everybody from this class out of the water, in my opinion. Sorry, I just got a really good look at Russell's tongue, so let me compose. No. Yeah, your dog tongue. But anyways, so Dorial Green-Beckham is, I mean, he's, like, I know that people are kind of poo-pooing the whole idea of him, you know, being the best wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson or whatever. If he had stayed in college and kind of bore out his collegiate career as opposed to, you know, being kicked out of Missouri and not playing a down last year, I think that would probably be a legitimate discussion, especially in this draft class. I think he'd be challenging to be a top 5 pick in, you know, the NFL draft. So, I mean, the guy's incredible. He's 6'6", like 220, and he's got a long, lean frame. He beats guys in college without even trying. I mean, both of his success rate against coverage scores, like zone and man, were in the 80%, which, like I've mentioned, is very good. The only really negative thing that I can say about him is he's a little inconsistent releasing from the line of scrimmage. And I did have him as just against 9 press attempts, he had an 11.9 or 11.1% success rate against press, which is very low. So that kind of demonstrates that he's still very raw. Like you can't not say that about him because he still is a very raw player. But like he's clearly the most talented player in the draft, or talented receiver in the draft. Might be the most talented player in the draft, you know, regardless. So he's definitely the from a physical standpoint, he's definitely the preferred guy to Amari Cooper.
I'm sort of coming around to the idea that initially I was kind of being stubborn and like, no, like he's going to be lower in my rankings because like these red flags are so huge. But as you sort of think about it more and look at him as a prospect more, the upside is just so unreal that he should be a middle round to like 1.5 to 1.7 sort of rookie pick. The upside's just unreal. So
yeah, and you know, like I don't know how much of this is legit, but like I don't think guys like Kuiper and Daniel Jeremiah, who are really well connected in the league, I don't think that they'd be just putting him in the first round of their mocks if there wasn't like some sort of, and like Russ Landy is another guy who put him really high. And he's very well connected within NFL circles. So I think that those guys, like putting them in the first round of their mocks, I think that is a good clue. Even Dane Brugler, who I know is like super conservative, he's even said that from what he's hearing, the character issues might not be as big of a factor in his draft day stock as much as you would think. I think he definitely goes first round, like regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely one of those type of players. Where he goes in the draft will affect his value because, like, I mean, I was a big Isaiah Crowell guy pre-draft and even post-draft last year, but the fact that he went undrafted definitely made his bust factor a lot higher.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, so I think that, like you guys said, it is very situation dependent. If like, just as a dynasty perspective, like, the fact that he does have these red flags might push him into the later half of the first round, and you might end up with a team like, you know, that's better suited for him with a better quarterback. So long term, as a dynasty asset, if he keeps his head on straight or whatever people are supposed to say, you know,
yeah,
it's good for him.
What do you think about Amari Cooper?
Yeah, see, the thing is, like, when I put this article out, he was the first prospect that I did for Reception Perception, like college guys. You know, I kind of like Roto World blurbed the piece and like cited the drop rate, which was 11.1%. Over 5 games was his drop rate, and like, you know, so immediately I get labeled as like an Amari Cooper hater or whatever, and people accuse me of overcorrecting or whatever. Like I was like, I didn't even have an original opinion. This is my first opinion. How could it be overcorrected? But no, I think that Cooper is a really, really good prospect. And I think that he is, again, another one of these guys that separates effortlessly. He's a strong route runner for such a young player. I mean, he's not even 21 yet, and he's produced really well at the college level. his target, like routes that he was targeted on 43% of the routes he ran, like that's ridiculous. That like Antonio Brown, I think he had the most targets from a wide receiver standpoint in the NFL, and I have him at 31.9% of his routes. So that's a huge jump. So you can see he just was owning that Alabama passing game, which I know contributes to like market share and stuff like that. And yeah, so Cooper's a really great prospect. I probably like Kevin White a little bit more. At this point, I haven't charted Kevin White, but he'll eventually get featured on Reception Perception as well. I probably preferred Kevin White just a little bit more, but Cooper is really solid, and I mean he could totally be Roddy White or Reggie Wayne if he ends up in the right offense in the right situation. He could be a very, very good NFL player.
Right, and the key here is that it's not that you're slamming him. It's not that you're saying he's bad. It's just that in terms of prospects, he's not necessarily that Julio Jones, A.J. Green type. He's like I sort of throw him in that Michael Crabtree, Justin Blackmon, like Hakeem Nicks-ish type of player, which is like can be a number one. So it's not a bad thing, and that's where I'm at with him too. So
yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think all those names are good for him. And you know, like just what shocks me is like people projecting him to be the 4th overall pick by the Raiders or something. Like that seems too much for me, and that would suck. That would really suck if he ended up in Oakland.
I felt Blackmon was pretty overdrafted too, so it wouldn't shock me if it happened, but I definitely wouldn't like him. I didn't really like Watkins at that pick either. I sort of threw Watkins in that range as well, you know? So
yeah, I mean, talking about Cooper, I mean, a lot of his like breakout age, market share, production metrics, like almost all of those metrics point to him being an incredibly safe prospect, and he's really young, like you said. So, I mean, I like him a little more than Kevin White just because Kevin White's a little older and doesn't have quite the production numbers. But I mean, we're splitting hairs at that point.
Right.
So we'll hit on one more rookie that you said you want to talk about. Devin Smith. You watched a little film on him today.
Yeah. Actually, I had four games of his, and then I just noticed today that the guy who puts the all 22 tape of, and you have to have, I should say this, like you have to have all 22 to be able to do reception perception, like just to be able to track all the routes and see when they're separating downfield. Like there's no way you could do that on like a draft breakdown cut up or anything like that. So so when I noticed that he posted another game, I went back and added another game's worth of numbers to Devin Smith's sample, and I really, really like Devin Smith. You know, I think that this is like a little bit of commentary on the draft Twitter community. I think when a guy like Devin Smith gets randomly hyped up by big media draft, like, you know, ESPN's like randomly putting him as the 24th overall best prospect or like in the first round of mocks, I think the like immediate reaction is to like slam that and be like, no, he's not, like,
or like sort of push back because I mean before the end of the year, I sort of tracked him all year because I did the Big Ten sort of Devy stuff, and
cool.
And like throughout the year, it was just like he was making unreal plays every week, but on like 2 or 3 catches. So it'd be like this guy just crushed it statistically. He just never really had the sample size to go with it, which I don't think you need. I think that was part of just the way Ohio State does things, but I do think it's a little weird that they never decided to give him like bigger reins in the offense, even though he was performing so amazing, you know?
Yeah, all right. Well, let me give you the wrap on that, or at least from my perspective after doing the reception perception charts. Like it was pretty clear that that like Ohio State kind of packages their receivers. Like there would be full like plays where he wouldn't be on the field. You know, like he would typically would play left or right wide receiver, be on the line of scrimmage, but only in certain packages. Like you said, there would go long periods of time where he wasn't even on the field.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but then the interesting part is that when he was on the field, then he became a focal part of the offense. You know, like then he got targeted on 23. Like so, he only ran 74 routes over a 5-game sample, only played 151 snaps. But then he's targeted on 23% of those routes, which is a pretty good number. I mean, it's not like It's not like a number one receiver sort of level like Amari Cooper's, but it's pretty decent for a college receiver who's in a run-heavy offense too. And that's another thing. I think that Smith didn't really get to show what he does best until Cardale Jones got in the game. Because I don't know, you said you watched a lot of Big Ten stuff, Russell. I don't know about you, but that other quarterback that they have was pretty like. I don't think he could throw well down the field, but I don't know I forget his name, but.
It was JT
Barrett. Yeah, that's it. But anyways, yeah, I mean, so Devin Smith, I don't want to ramble on here, but I mean, Devin Smith, like his as a 9 route runner, just a vertical down the field, his success rate versus coverage was 90.5%, which that's stupid. I mean, that I don't know any other way to say that except that is stupid. Like that's the highest that I ever charted. Like he scored 32.3 fantasy points on just 9 routes alone. That's really good. I mean, so like he. Go ahead. No,
go ahead. All right. Well, like when you look at like end of year statistics, he had 28 yards per catch.
Yeah.
Like, so every catch went at least or around. It averaged out to 28 yards, and I've never seen anyone within 5 yards of that before. Philip Dorsett was sort of in there for a little while this year. But, I mean, almost everyone regresses off of that pace, and he just kept it up all year. So his stats are off the charts, from what I looked at least.
Yeah, like, and so as a fantasy asset, I don't know what the hell we're going to do with Devin Smith, just because that'll be pretty situationally dependent. Like, hopefully he goes to a team that can actually throw the ball down the field. But just from an individual football player perspective, Devin Smith, I think, is going to step into the NFL from day one and be able to give you a legit deep threat, like a legit, really good deep threat. Like that's how good he is as a downfield weapon. Like, because not only does he separate, get that 90.5% success rate versus coverage, he also snagged every contested catch that I had.
He has legit ball skills too, and I was sort of really excited about picking him. If he went, I figured him to go in the middle rounds just based on the small sample size, but it seems people have sort of figured it out and even like him more than I do. So
yeah, I hear you. And there are definitely and like even if he might never develop off just being a deep threat. But even that's like the most tactical, game-changing thing that you can do as a passing offense. So I think he's worth that first round, like late first round, early second round value for an NFL team. But I'll tell you, there are flashes, like technical route running flashes that he has that could say that he could develop, like not for sure, but there's a chance that when he's asked to do it, because he was never asked to really be that player at Ohio State. Like there are routes where he comes back to the ball, breaks off his routes at the right time. I think that there's a chance, like there's a better than 0% chance that he ends up being like a complete receiver.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take that for what it's worth, I guess. Better than 0%.
Yeah, I wasn't laughing at the analysis, just the less than 0.
Yeah.
And I have a tongue on my face.
Yeah, well, that is pretty funny.
Yeah. So hit on Crabtree real quick, the guy that sort of got you onto ESPN.
Yeah, right. That's still crazy. But anyways, so Crabtree, I like when he was on that like 2012 or 2011 season, was it? I think it was 2012 when Kaepernick first became the quarterback. I thought Crabtree was like ready to become a top 10 sort of receiver in the NFL, but then obviously like he got hurt. Kaepernick, that's a whole other story. But I'll circle back to that in a second. But I really thought that he was ready to ascend at that point. But obviously it didn't happen. On all these other young studs came in, so now he's kind of out of that conversation completely for good reason. But so here's the deal with Crabtree. He's still very good, like in the short to intermediate areas. When he breaks off routes is real. Like he's a great timing player. He still knows exactly when to snap left or snap right, break off at the stem of routes, come back to the quarterback. He has great timing, and like you can tell that he's lost a little bit of his physical prowess. I mean, like he can't run deep anymore. Like his 9 route figures was like in the 35%. Like that's really low. Like he just doesn't separate in the deep game, but he's a really good route runner. The problem is playing with Kaepernick. Kaepernick is like the perfect definition of a see it, throw it quarterback. And Bolden is the perfect see it, throw it receiver. You could just give it to Bolden and he's going to catch it no matter, and even if he's not open.
Yeah.
Crabtree needs to be with an anticipation, accurate, hit a guy in stride sort of quarterback, like a Teddy Bridgewater or something like that. That would be That would be a perfect fit. So I still think Crabtree is a very good receiver. I don't think he will ever be what some people thought he would be coming out of college, but if he moves teams this offseason and he goes to a team with a quarterback like a Teddy Bridgewater or trying to think of other anticipatory passes off the top of my head, like Drew Brees, even if that is not going to happen, or he goes to the Patriots or something like that, I think he's going to have a lot of sneaky value going forward in he'll be able to recoup a lot of value that he lost in San Francisco.
Or maybe he could go to the Chiefs and
oh God. Nobody should ever go to the Chiefs. Nobody should ever go to the Chiefs.
I don't know, man. What if he just they dump it off to him and he can get 3 yards?
Yeah, so he can average 5 yards a catch and catch 1 touchdown. That might be the only place worse for him than San Francisco.
Yeah, no, obviously.
Back with Alex Smith,
facetious, but
yeah, right. I think, and that's the funny part too, is that when Kaepernick became the starter over Alex Smith, that was I remember even reading Crabtree was pretty much vocally kind of hell yeah, so
that's funny.
And then it's just turned around. Yeah, so he's just a really, really bad fit with the guy who's been his quarterback for 2 or 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's on top of his injury, I think that's really hurt the way he's perceived. But he's still a very good receiver.
Right, and that's a lot of the dynasty risk, the range of outcomes I talk about. If you ran sort of Crabtree's career sort of 100 times, this would be one of the worst potential outcomes,
Absolutely.
In my opinion. At least
absolutely.
with injuries and.
Yeah, no, I mean he's 27, but he has about 47-year-old knees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's just been beat up the whole time. So.
And you can tell, like I said, it's apparent. He can't get open deep anymore at all. So he's gonna. But he's like I said, there's some players that compensate well for that, and I think he's one of them.
Yeah.
All right, so it looks like we've hit about the hour mark, so we'll wrap up the show here. Matt, tell everyone where they can find you, reception, and all that good stuff.
Well, you can find the draft prospect articles on footballguys.com. Devin Smith will be the next one that gets featured, and Dorial Green-Beckham and Amari Cooper are already up there. And I'll be, putting up random blog posts at thebackyardbanter.com, where that's pretty much will be the hub for reception perception going forward. And you can expect the big project publication to be released sometime in June or July. I will hopefully in the coming months have a more firm release date to give people, but just right now, it's the first year doing it. I don't know when it's gonna get out. And so we'll see. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
This was fun.
Yeah, I followed you guys, both of you guys, for a long time. Nathan more begrudgingly than Russell, but after tonight. After tonight with Dogface, I don't know. The pendulum might swing the other way.
I gotta send you flowers or something to swing it back then.
Yeah, I appreciate all sorts of sucking up.
All right, guys. As always, you can find myself at NPLFF on the Twitter. Right for DLF. Pretty much that's all I'm doing right now. And I'm also scouting middle schoolers. Make sure to hit me up for your middle school scouting reports. I can get them to you.
Dude, we are quite the combo, aren't we?
Never mind. It's back to Russell.
Yes!
All right, where can they find you, Russell?
I'm also a writer for DynastyLeagueFootball.com. I have a face that looks like a dog, and if you want to unfollow, I totally respect that decision. But you can find me at FF Russell Clay if this appeals to you. So thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate it.
Peace.
See you guys.